Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've spent most of 2025 dealing with a severe case of sepsis that nearly killed me. While it wasn't exactly a fun experience, there was this one incident during my hospital stay that I just have to share. I work in the healthcare charity sector, and over the years, I've built connections with various people in the field. One of those connections happens to be our nation's current health minister. We go way back. When I was just starting in the sector, they were working as a political aide, basically running around getting coffee for politicians. We've maintained a friendly relationship since then. During one rough day in the hospital, I was barely conscious due to all the medications. I had chest drains and multiple broken ribs from being resuscitated, so every movement was pure agony. The ward sister came in around 11 a.m. looking unusually anxious and told me something about the ward being closed and expecting visitors. Honestly, I was so drugged up, she could have told me aliens had landed, and I wouldn't have cared. What followed was possibly the most uncomfortable cleaning session of my life. 2 nurses had to give me a bath, and while this might sound like the start of some fantasy, let me tell you, when you're in that much pain, the last thing on your mind is how attractive your nurses are. Later, 3 visitors arrived at my room. In my drugged up state, I greeted them rather rudely, asking them what the hell they were doing there. We chatted for a while, though I honestly can't remember what about. Then came the moment that's forever etched in my memory. Enter the food service worker. The food service worker immediately started causing a scene, demanding to know why there were visitors during protected mealtime and insisting they leave immediately. When one of my visitors tried to explain, the food service worker cut them off and threatened to get the ward sister and security involved. The ward sister appeared at the door, saw what was happening, and practically sprinted back down the corridor. A few minutes later, she returned with the lead doctor and our determined food service worker. The food service worker launched into a lecture about the importance of patient eating schedules and how being busy wasn't an excuse to ignore visiting hours. My visitor politely interrupted, apologizing for the meal disruption, but explaining that this was their only chance to see me before my next surgery. The food service worker made a smug comment about who makes the rules in the hospital. That's when my visitor stood up and told them that, as the health minister of our nation, they were actually the person who made the rules. The food service worker's jaws practically hit the floor. The ward sister facepalmed so hard I thought she might knock herself out, and the doctor let out the most unprofessional snort I've ever heard. I started giggling, which was absolute torture, with my broken ribs and chest drains. The food service worker turned red, made some unintelligible sounds, and practically ran from the room with their food cart. Later, they requested a transfer to a different ward the very next day. The health minister still brings up this story whenever we meet for drinks, and I have to admit, despite all the pain and difficulty of that time, this moment of perfect comeuppance still makes me smile. Though I have to say, laughing with broken ribs is definitely not an experience I'd recommend to anyone. My grandparents have lived in their house for over 40 years. My grandma developed multiple sclerosis about 15 years ago, and it progressed to the point where she needs a wheelchair to get around. Despite her condition, she's always been the sweetest person you'll ever meet. She loves gardening from her wheelchair and has this adorable golden retriever who helps her by carrying light tools and keeping her company. My grandpa, on the other hand, is a retired Marine. He's always been protective of Grandma, especially since her condition worsened. He's the kind of man who doesn't say much, but when he does, you better listen. He also has this old rifle he keeps locked up, a reminder of his service days. Everything was peaceful until these new neighbors moved in next door about 6 months ago. The mother, let's just call her Karen, has these 3 undisciplined kids who've been nothing but trouble since day 1. Last weekend, I was visiting my grandparents when everything went down. I was inside helping Grandpa with lunch, while Grandma was in the backyard with her dog. Suddenly, we heard shouting. I walked to the window and asked what was happening outside. The scene that unfolded was intense. My grandma was trying to explain to Karen that her children had been throwing rocks at her dog for the past 10 minutes, and that she had already politely asked them to stop 3 times. Karen immediately got defensive, insisting that her angels would never hurt a dog and that they were just playing. My grandma pointed out that they had hit her dog twice and that he was terrified. That's when Karen became even more hostile, suggesting that if Grandma kept her mutt inside, this wouldn't happen. She even had the nerve to say that this was a neighborhood for normal people, not disabled old ladies with their stupid dogs. My grandma, maintaining her dignity, reminded Karen that she had every right to be in her own backyard with her service dog and asked her to leave. Karen's response was to challenge my grandma, daring her to make her leave. Then it happened. Karen stepped forward and deliberately kicked my grandma's wheelchair hard. The wheelchair tipped over, sending my grandma sprawling onto the ground. Her dog started barking frantically, trying to protect her. Everything after that happened so fast. I was about to run outside when I heard a loud bang. Grandpa had grabbed his rifle and fired a warning shot, except it wasn't exactly a warning shot. The bullet had grazed Karen's ear, taking a chunk of it clean off. Karen started screaming bloody murder, holding the side of her head. Her kids ran home crying, and within minutes, the police and an ambulance arrived. Here's where it gets even more interesting. During the police investigation, multiple neighbors came forward with security camera footage showing Karen's kids terrorizing not just my grandma's dog, but other pets in the neighborhood too. They also had footage of Karen kicking the wheelchair. When the police questioned my grandpa about discharging his firearm, he remained perfectly calm. He explained that he had witnessed a younger, able-bodied woman violently attack his disabled wife, knocking her to the ground. He told them he wasn't sure if she was going to continue assaulting her, so he aimed to stop the threat while minimizing the risk of lethal injury. The investigation lasted a few weeks, but eventually the district attorney ruled it as self-defense. They determined that given my grandpa's military background, he had the skill to make that precise shot, and his response was justified given the circumstances. An able-bodied person attacking a disabled elderly woman. Karen needed reconstructive surgery for her ear. She tried to press charges against my grandpa, but it backfired spectacularly. Instead, she ended up facing charges for assault on a disabled person and got slapped with a restraining order. Grandma still gardens in her backyard, but now she's got a new security camera system. Grandpa's idea, of course. Her dog has recovered from the trauma and is back to being his happy self. I've been working in client services for over a decade now. I'd say I'm pretty good at what I do. My current role involves conducting client interviews. We're talking 6 to 9 appointments every single day. Each interview starts with the same script, a full page of text that takes about 30 minutes to read at a normal pace. It's not exactly riveting stuff, but it's necessary for legal and compliance reasons. Here's the thing. I've always had an exceptional memory. It's just how my brain works. Give me something to memorize, and it sticks. This has been incredibly useful throughout my career, especially with these client interviews. I've memorized not just the main script, but several other standard ones we use regularly. This allows me to multitask. While I'm reciting the script, I can review the client's case files, check reports, and prepare for the meat of the interview. Every manager I've had in the past has appreciated this skill. They saw it as efficient and professional. That was until my current immediate supervisor came along. I'll be honest, I've noticed she's been having some memory issues lately, which is concerning, but that's beside the point. For some reason, she took personal offense to my method. One day, she called me into her office. She started by telling me we needed to discuss my client interviews. When I asked if there was a problem with my performance, she complained that I wasn't reading the script properly and insisted that I needed to read it directly from the page. I tried explaining that I knew it word for word and never missed anything. Plus, it allowed me to be more efficient with my time. She wouldn't accept my explanation, stating that the script needed to be read, not recited. I tried to explain how this actually benefited both the clients and the company, but she wouldn't hear it. Instead, she escalated it to her supervisor, who then took it to our policy department. A few days later, I was called into another meeting, this time with both supervisors. The senior supervisor told me that the policy department had reviewed the matter and insisted that the script must be read directly from the page during all client interviews. When I asked why, pointing out that I hadn't had a single complaint and my performance metrics were above average, my immediate supervisor cut in to say it was about maintaining consistency and professionalism. I argued that I was already consistent, saying the exact same words in the exact same order every time. The senior supervisor shut down the discussion by declaring the decision was final, and from now on, I must have the physical script in front of me and read from it during interviews. I left that meeting feeling frustrated, but also slightly amused. They wanted me to hold the script. Fine. They wanted me to read from it. Also fine. But they never specified how I had to hold it or what direction it needed to face. The next day, I started my malicious compliance campaign. During my first interview, I held the script upside down, closed my eyes, and recited it perfectly while pretending to read. My immediate supervisor happened to walk by and did a double take, but she couldn't say anything because technically I was following the new policy to the letter. This went on for a few weeks. Some clients found it amusing, though most didn't even notice since they were focused on their own paperwork. My immediate supervisor was getting increasingly agitated, but she couldn't fault my performance. My metrics were still excellent, and I hadn't missed a single word of the script. Then came the day when she finally snapped. She confronted me, saying my behavior was unacceptable and that I was clearly not reading the script. I replied that I was holding the script as required by policy and suggested that if she was concerned about my accuracy, she could record my sessions and compare them to the written version. When she pointed out that the script was upside down, I innocently asked if there was a policy specifying which direction the script must face. She stormed off to consult with the senior supervisor and the policy department. The next day, I received an email specifying that the script must be held right side up and facing the reader. That's when I decided to take it up a notch. I submitted a formal request to our Human Resources department. I explained that due to the new specific requirements regarding script reading, I would like to request a reasonable accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act, specifically a Braille version of all our scripts. The Human Resources representative seemed confused and pointed out that I didn't read Braille. I cheerfully responded that I'd be happy to learn, mentioning the company's professional development opportunities and suggesting it would make our services more accessible. The Human Resources representative looked both amused and exasperated. They knew exactly what I was doing, but they also knew I had backed them into a corner. Either they had to approve my request for reasonable accommodation, which would mean I could continue my current practice while sliding my fingers across a Braille version, or they had to admit that the whole must-read from the page policy was unnecessary as long as the information was being conveyed accurately and professionally. A week later, I received another email from the policy department. The new guidance stated that staff members may deliver the required script in any manner that ensures 100% accuracy and maintains professional standards. My immediate supervisor avoided eye contact with me for weeks afterward. I'm still doing my interviews the same way I always have, reciting the script from memory while multitasking with case files. The only difference is that now I have official policy backing me up. Some background. I've been working at this local brewery for about 3 years now. It's a great job, good tips, amazing regulars, and my co-workers are like family. Usually I work the evening shift starting at 5 p.m., but yesterday was different. You see, my mom had been having some health issues lately. Nothing too serious at first, just some discomfort that the doctors couldn't quite figure out. But on Thursday, things took a turn for the worse, and she needed emergency surgery. It was scary, but the doctors assured us she'd pull through. I was supposed to have Valentine's Day off, but I switched shifts with a co-worker so I could visit my mom at the hospital during regular visiting hours. So there I was, working the 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. shift on Valentine's Day. The brewery was starting to fill up with the early dinner crowd when she walked in, my ex-husband's current wife. She came in with her little entourage of friends, all dressed up for what I assumed was their pre-Valentine's dinner plans. Now, let me tell you about this woman. She's the type who loves to flaunt her perfect life on social media. Ever since she married my ex 2 years ago, she's made it her mission to remind me, directly or indirectly, about how much better their life is compared to mine. She's never outright rude. Oh no. She's mastered the art of subtle digs wrapped in sugary sweetness. I spotted them as soon as they walked in, but I kept it professional. I've dealt with worse customers, and I wasn't about to let her presence ruin my shift. They sat in my section. Of course they did. And I approached their table with my usual smile. I greeted them professionally and asked for their drink orders, maintaining my regular customer service demeanor. I took their orders, brought their drinks, and kept everything perfectly professional. Her friends kept looking at me when they thought I wasn't looking, probably hoping for some drama. But I've been in the service industry long enough to know better. Throughout their visit, I could hear them giggling and whispering, obviously talking about me. I just kept doing my job, checking on their table when needed, refilling their drinks, and bringing their food. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me bothered. When they were getting ready to leave, she hung back while her friends headed toward the door. She approached the bar where I was cleaning glasses, wearing that fake smile I'd come to know so well. She thanked me for the service in that syrupy, sweet voice of hers, making sure to mention how hard it must be working on Valentine's Day. I simply acknowledged her comment and continued working, but she wasn't done. She made sure to tell me about her plans for the evening, mentioning how they were heading to that new French restaurant downtown and how her husband had made reservations weeks ago, emphasizing how thoughtful he was. I just nodded and continued working. But then came the final dig. She asked if I had any fun plans after getting off work. The way she said it was dripping with false concern and thinly veiled mockery. Her friends were watching from near the door, clearly expecting me to either get upset or make up some sad excuse about being alone on Valentine's Day. Instead, I looked her straight in the eyes and told her about my mom's emergency surgery yesterday and how I was going to visit her at the hospital after my shift. Her smug smile disappeared instantly, replaced by a deer-in-headlights expression. Her friends by the door suddenly found the floor very interesting. She stammered out an awkward response, saying she didn't know about my mom's situation. I simply wished her a nice Valentine's Day, maintaining my composure. She practically scurried out of the brewery, her friends following quickly behind her. One of my regular customers, who had witnessed the whole thing, raised his glass to me from across the bar. Later that evening, I visited my mom at the hospital. She was recovering well and even laughed when I told her about what happened at work. She's always said that living well is the best revenge, but sometimes watching someone choke on their own mean-spirited assumptions is pretty satisfying too. My ex called me the next day to ask about my mom. Apparently, his wife had been unusually quiet all evening during their perfect Valentine's dinner. I guess it's hard to enjoy your expensive French cuisine when you're digesting a big serving of humble pie. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.